guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 152. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where we're talking about painting, modeling, and working experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 activities a week. How? Could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, there was a whole bunch of new miniature-related things, and the first one is a surprising another Kroot guy. Slip through the battlefield and pounce on your prey with the new Kroot Trail Shaper. This is the third Shaper we've got. We got the War Shaper, we got the Flesh Shaper, and now we got the Trail Shaper, and hopefully they're out of Shapers. I appreciate getting more Kroot models, but I'm not a huge fan of the Genestealer cult style of like a half dozen different little upgrade characters, and you really kind of should buy one for every single squad because they're like 35 for $40 a pop. They're really expensive. It is really nice getting extra keywords and like one extra ability on your squad. Like I'm working on my Dark Eldar right now, and it's really hard not to buy an Archon for like every single squad just to make them better. But a lot of guys. It's also hard to like, when trying to figure out what power up, what ability you want each guy, it can sometimes be annoying if like you've got 3 squads of Kroot and you're like, okay, they've got the sustained hits, they've got the -1 leadership if they kill something in combat, and then the Trail Shaper actually is probably the best one by far. They haven't shown off the rules for the other Shapers, but they showed off the rule for this guy, and he has 2 abilities actually. He has a pre-game, you can move 2 units around, and that's pretty huge. Unfortunately, I think they're Kroot units. If you were like a Tau player, and all of a sudden your broadside just goes yoink and shifts halfway across the board, that would be really, really powerful. Swapping Kroots around, dropping them into strategic reserve is pretty huge, and just moving things in general pre-game is really, really powerful. His other ability, when something moves within 9 inches of him and his units, they can make a D6 normal move. D6 normal move is really, really swingy. You could roll like a 3, 4, 5, 6 and maybe shift yourself back into a building or into a ruin, but if you roll a 1 or a 2, you're kind of trapped in the open when you expected to be gone, and that could, And then you're like, do I spend the command point because I really wanted it to happen, but you really shouldn't do the command point reroll. You should spend it on your stratagems because they generally do more for you than just rerolling a single dice. And like 50% of the time, that rerolling of the dice doesn't do anything, even if it was a 2-up. And you're like, I need to make the 2-up. You're inevitably going to command point reroll and get another one and fail. And it just destroys you. It's really, really cool to get all of this new Kroot stuff. It's also really cool. I think we all assume this, but the Kroot rifle is a break action, breech loading, single shot rifle, which is kind of perfect. It reminds me of a little bit of Mandalorian's blaster, RIP. Although his wasn't quite a break, it was a breach. But I just love the idea of the Kroot like reloading this single shot rifle every single time. Species in the Warhammer 41st Millennium. But it's a really, really cool model. I do think its abilities are super interesting, and it'll be I really want to see how all of these Kroot units synergize with the Tau. I played against the Tau this week on little TTS, my Dark Eldar against some Tau. The Tau are kind of a horde army. They bring a lot of units, and some of their units are absolutely phenomenal. Crisis suits led by a commander. Oh my god, they have all the keywords in the world. They have fly. It seems like they can do absolutely anything. They can fall back and shoot. Like they're a really tough little unit. With the commander, they have a 4-up invuln, 6 wounds apiece with all of their shield drones. So what, 6 times 7? And then you have to double that for the number of rolls you actually have to make for damage to go through. They're a pretty powerful little team. Although I would like to say that I kind of won. We called it a draw at the end of turn 3, but if we played it out, I had a lot more units than the Tau player had, so it was Sean. I beat him again. We've gotten a heck of a lot of new Kroot units, but there are still some to be shown off for sure. There's one that we still haven't seen. It was shown off, I think at the LVO, and it was a Kroot riding a dinosaur. So presumably it's a Narlock rider, maybe. The dinosaur looks very dragony, not very Krootish. And I really miss the Forge World Narlock riders. They got discontinued like 13 years ago, but they were so good. Kroot riding like Gisasaurs. Like, they were so weird looking, but they had so much character and personality. I really like those models. And I'm sure that Kroot on Dragon will be pretty darn cool, but it doesn't do for me what the old Narlock riders did. They looked really cool. And of course, I can't imagine Games Workshop is not gonna do the Great Narlock. Any Dawn of War fans out there, the Narlock is an absolute beast. Just walking that thing into your player's fortress and just getting pounded on all sides from their entire army, and the Narlock just doesn't go down, and then you play the rampage stratagem, and it's just, it's glorious. Games Workshop, I for 100% believe that they're gonna do the Great Narlock, if only because it's gonna be really big and probably really expensive, but man, I'm here for it. The Narlock is really cool, and it'll be cool to get the Dino Riders. I can't wait to see how the Kroot work in a Tau army, because Tau are very fast, very bad in close combat, tons and tons of bodies, decent guns on pretty darn cheap chassis. And so, like, will Kroot make them faster? Will Kroot just kind of be like a turn 1 blocking unit? Because pretty much everything is going to have infiltrate. So are you gonna like throw up the Kroot and then just throw them up the board to clog things up, block movement, maybe tie up some vehicles, while your Tau army also kind of races up the board? Or is it gonna be more for Tau gunline people who want to bring more of the big guns? And so you've got your Kroot kind of running around, and then you've got your big guns in the backfield. They don't really have much indirect fire. I don't know if they have any indirect fire in their army. That'll be really interesting. It feels like Kroot are a little bit their own thing. And if this was 7th edition Warhammer, they almost certainly would be their own thing with their own codex and their own PDF, because that's when Games Workshop is really going hard on ebooks. But yeah, I want to see it, because it's going to fundamentally change the codex. There's so many new Kroot units. There's the Bruiser Rider guys, there's the gun platforms, there's all of these different suits, or these different teams of Kroot. There's even the Farstalker Kin Band, which I think has its own rules. I think it's just a regular Kroot squad with a little bit more firepower. But man, I've played the Tau. It's interesting. I want to see what happens to them. But the Kroot were not the only thing to get a brand new unit. The Warhammer 30K Solar Auxilia. It's 30K, but it is a kind of a cool model. It is the Baby Sentinel. Just a little two-legged walker with a guy riding on the back, and it is really cool looking. I was thinking, because it looks like this is going to be a 2-pack of miniatures, and that could be a really good way to get Sentinels, because Sentinels are kind of expensive for what they are. And when they got remade, they went up from a 60mm base to an 80mm base. 80mm bases are big. Like, I don't quite understand Games Workshop's love of making things a lot bigger. Sometimes works great. Space Marines should be a little bigger. Everything in the game, I don't know if that needs to happen. Like, Dreadnoughts went from 60mm bases to 100mm bases, and the size of 10th edition game boards got significantly smaller, going from a 4x6 to a 60x40 sized table. There's all of a sudden way less room, and the models are getting way bigger. It's a little bit obnoxious, especially when you play armies that really like to deep strike, and all of a sudden it's like you have to deep strike 9 inches away from enemy units, and you run around with a tape measure and you're like, there's no spot on this board I can deep strike. Base sizes. But these guys look small to me. To my eye, it looks like they're standing on 50mm bases, so it'd probably be a little tricky to proxy them as Sentinels. They would look really cool though. One thing I thought might be really cool for these guys is running them as field ordnance batteries. It's a little 2-unit team of something. You can have an indirect fire gun, or you can have a direct fire gun. And if you wanted to do like a really cool fast, if you want to make your army look like it's a really fast moving army, these guys could be really cool proxies because of their legs. And so, when you have your mechanized guard army just all sitting there ready to go, everything is on tracks or legs, I think would be a pretty darn cool look compared to like these stationary wagon vehicles. It might be a slightly difficult to pull off. You probably have to maybe just head swap the Solar Auxilia guy. I don't know, for some reason, I really like the Imperial Guard. They have a lot of character. The Catachan, which is just Rambos, the Kazarkin, the Cadians, the Kriegers. But the Solar Auxilia, because they wear so much armor, they feel very faceless. And because their like helmets are just a little bit stormtroopery with a little bit less detail, they don't have as much character to me. And I still think it comes down to the Games Workshop paint style of everything is gray or brass. So it just feels I think if there was like a grimdark Solar Auxilia army, I think that would probably change my mind a little bit, because I think that would look a little bit cooler than just the way that they exist now. Also, just reading the Horus Heresy novels, and like Horus Heresy or Horsey Heresy is about the Space Marines, like millions of Space Marines doing battle. And yes, there were tons and tons and tons of Solar Auxilia running around fighting, but it's like in the novels when, you know, the Adeptus Sororitas and the Officio Assassinorum and the Imperial Guard are fighting across an entire planet, millions of battlefields spread across a decades-long campaign, and it's epic and awesome. But then this, 6 Space Marines show up and win the day. And so they just kind of steal the show. And so I feel like the Solar Auxilia are kind of always meant to be singing back up to the Space Marines. And so that also makes them feel a little bit more wimpy. But speaking of wimpy, these guys are really, really cool. They remind me a lot of, if anybody remembers, Tremors 2 Aftershocks, a really, really great made-for-TV sequel to Tremors. Honestly, I think it's really, Tremors 1 is a masterpiece. Tremors 2 is really darn good. Tremors 3, Tremors 4, really fun movie. Tremors 5, 6, 7, and 8, you don't really need to watch them. They're really not that good. Shout out to all you Tremors fans out there. This little Sentinel is super, super cute. Oh yeah, but this guy reminds me of the Shriekers from Tremors 2 Aftershocks. That's why I was thinking about Tremors. Also, I'm kind of always thinking about Tremors. I really like the Graboids. They're super cool. But yeah, they're just the two-legged little silly, like they don't have a lot of aggression to them with their little chicken legs and their little riot shield in the front with a gun sticking out the front. It's kind of funny looking, but I like it. I like that it's kind of silly looking. They would make decent field ordnance batteries, although field ordnance batteries stand on 100mm bases. So this guy would be absolutely dwarfed sitting in the middle of that base. It's an interesting model, and I think it does have some really, really good proxy potential. I'm just not quite sure. Maybe the Sicarian Rustalkers, the Iron Strider Belisari's from the Adeptus Mechanicus, although those models are also giant, which is really disappointing because I think in game they're like 55 points each. They're a tiny little nothing unit, but when they came out, they're just a really big piece of plastic, and so they're really expensive, and you can't run them the way you want to run them. Because in theory, it should be like a line of lance-wielding knights charging into the enemy's lines. But at 55 bones a pop, it's just not gonna happen. It's like, this is my $300 unit that is only 250 points in game. Good old Games Workshop and their prices. But I do like this kit. The Solar Auxilia is neat, but if I ever got into 30K, which I'm not gonna, because it's more Space Marines, I already tried this. I actually tried this once before. I have my Black Templar, 14,000 points, and I thought, you know what? I could use a little bit more Space Marines in my life. And so I started a Deathwatch army and quickly discovered I did not need more Space Marines in my life. So I sold that army. But if I was going to do 30K, I would probably do the Word Bearers, because I think red with all the little script work would be really, really cool. Maybe in the little game, what's it called? It's not Epic, it's Legions. No, it's not Legions Imperialis. I think that's right. Legions Imperialis, the tiny one. At least that one is in a smaller scale, so I feel like it would maybe paint up a little bit easier or just feel different. That's really what makes other games fun for me, is when they offer me something else. I play a lot of 30K, a lot of Kill Team, and if another game exists like Conquest, looks really cool with the rank and flank. Mantic's Armada is boats and gives me a lot of great like nostalgia for the game X-Wing. A game has to be really different for me to want to get into it. And 30K, I've read the rules. It's got some interesting mechanics that I kind of would like to see incorporated into Big 40K proper, but the game has to be really different for me to be like, yeah, I'm gonna sink a couple 100 hours of building models and terrain and figuring this game out. But speaking of figuring things out, or Star Wars Shatterpoint, segue! Star Wars Shatterpoint has some new boxes coming out. Star Wars Shatterpoint is a game that I'm okay with. I've only played it twice, and I lost both times to Sean. So that definitely soured my feelings a little tiny bit, but the models are really cool. They're like 40mm Star Wars minis, so they're really, really fun to paint up. They're a little bit bigger. The game is only based on characters, really. It's kind of Marvel Crisis Protocol for Star Wars. Not necessarily in mechanics, but in what the game is. And it's kind of, one thing that irks me about the game is that there's not necessarily factions. You purchase things with points. And so you could purchase anything. Like you could have the bad guys and the good guys running on the same team, which happened on occasion in Star Wars The Clone Wars. I think Asajj Ventress and like Obi-Wan teamed up for like one fight scene. Or speaking of bad guy, good guy team ups, the new box that is coming out that has me really excited is Hondo Ohnaka, the Weequay pirate lord, essentially Captain Jack Sparrow in Star Wars. One of the coolest things in all of the Clone Wars. Just a really fun, not necessarily nice, but always entertaining guy. Every time he ended up in an episode, he's just the best. It comes with a few of his Weequay buddies, and of course his Kabwakian monkey lizard, which is the parrot on his shoulder because he's a pirate lord. That's what, like, because Shatterpoint, it's got its claws in me because I love Star Wars so much. One of my favorite things I own is my Queen Amidala from the Phantom Menace for Shatterpoint, which I do need to play with. I actually have most of Shatterpoint completely painted up just because I am such a Star Wars fanatic. So I should play the game a whole bunch more just to get a feel for the different stuff, because I've only played with the starter sets, but I do have most of the expansion boxes, so I should give it a few more tries. I'm trying to convince myself right now. I know Scott's been enjoying the game, but Scott's a silly goose. I don't know. If I can get Hondo painted up and I can also get my Cad Bane painted up, that might be a really fun team. Even though those characters don't necessarily get along, if it was for the right price, they would totally team up for a game of Star Wars Shatterpoints to go up against like the big bads like Darth Maul. One thing that's really hilarious in any Star Wars game really is characters with lightsabers going up against characters who don't have lightsabers. In Shatterpoint, it's a little sillier. Like clones don't instantly die when Asajj Ventress charges them. In Star Wars Legion, it's kind of not true. In Star Wars Legion, characters with lightsabers absolutely wreck, which is really, really fun. I love Star Wars Legion. Star Wars Legion is Star Wars 40K. It's great. You build an army, you build all your troops, you run them around the board. It's got some alternating activation stuff going on, and it actually has a randomized action pool economy, kind of like games like Bolt Action. So it's got a lot of different things to offer than proper 40K. Where Star Wars Shatterpoint is a little bit more board gamey with alternate activation and skirmish combat, but it's mostly about holding command points. I don't know. I feel like I'm just talking myself in and out of the game with every other sentence, but I'm definitely gonna be painting up Hondo. He's really, really cool. But you know what is even cooler than Hondo? That's right, our Patreon. Over there, we have a brand new set of terrain every single month, and this month we have the Ruined Temple, a set of blocks, walls, and accessories that allow you to build the chaotic temple of your dreams. And if you always want to be up to date on the goings-on here at Eons of Battle and be entered into our monthly giveaways, this month we're giving away a copy of Age of Sigmar's Dominion, and we're picking 3 followers to receive this month's terrain. Follow the link in the description below to sign up to our newsletter. Lot of really cool miniatures coming out. It was kind of a transitionary week for me in my modeling. I feel like I'm in between projects. I'm doing a lot of building, which I think the start of the year has been really, really fun because I've been finishing things, but now I'm getting back into building the things that I have to paint. And as much as I love building, it takes a long time and it's not painting. So it definitely feels like it's pumping the brakes on some of the projects, but oh, there's some big stuff coming up. Stay tuned.